So how did we end up in this situation? How did the one place everybody's told is a haven for the Jews end up becoming one of the worst places on earth for Jews to live in? What is it exactly that makes the Holy Land myth as deadly as it's proven itself to be? Well, after the Holocaust, it was presumed that the best way to prevent another genocide from happening is for the Jews to have a reliable military. But that was insufficient. What they should have done is rank-ordered every country in the world according to a security score and broken it down into 4 parameters. Military prowess, certainly. Public sentiment, government allegiance, which in a democracy is tied to public sentiment, and last but not least, the most neglected of the 4, foreign relations. We have one of the strongest armies in the world, military prowess at least a 70. Our government allegiance, being democratic representatives of a Jewish majority populace, is at least an 85. These are obviously estimated numbers. Practically no chance the Israeli government would ever turn against their populace, at least for being Jewish. Public sentiment, as we've discussed earlier, through the firewall, could be upwards of 95. We got rid of classic anti-Semitism almost entirely. But despite the stellar performance on 3 out of the 4 factors that guarantee safety, Israel's security score lives and dies by 1 parameter: foreign relations. Our foreign relations are among the worst of any country on earth. I hesitate to even give it a number for fear of what it would do to the overall score. This factor, and this factor alone, is the reason Zionism, despite its magnificent attempts to create a haven state, ended up creating something completely different: a military state. And this military state doesn't come without its benefits. As I've said, you don't have to worry about being expelled from your home, even though the evacuation rate within Israel, being a permanent war zone, has been obscene. Practically all of those evacuations were temporary. You don't have to deal with being threatened by people who actually live among you over the fact that you're Jewish, nearly to the same extent as countries with a lower public sentiment score. Lynchings are practically non-existent. You don't have to worry about government betrayal, where your own state turns against you, because the public sentiments have been shifting and enacting God knows what policies against you. And discrimination, this one is actually a little rough, because anti-Jewish discrimination is actually very high in Israel due to pro-Arab affirmative action. Jews often have to move to Italy and Romania just to be accepted into medical school. So let's say this one is just as bad. Of course, our military prowess all but ensures that if we are attacked, at least for the time being, we will be able to defend ourselves and most likely emerge victorious, albeit at the cost of many lives. But let me ask you this. If the idea that prevention beats punishment, which is the whole purpose of the firewall, applies to internal hostilities, why can't it also be applied to external hostility? Never being attacked is much better than being able to defend yourself. We should have that ability, sure, but it's also important to position ourselves so we'd never have to use it. This is something every respectable fighter understands. It's the first lesson of warfare. The fact of the matter is, in acknowledging all of these triumphs, we must also put our failures into perspective and realize that our stance on counterterrorism, which stems from our absolutely horrific foreign relations situation in terms of harm caused to Jews, is second only to systematic genocide. Most people think anti-Semitism is the biggest current threat to Jews, but it's not. It's actually counterterrorism. Not even the most extreme forms of persecution can rival the damage that's been caused to us by our stance on counterterrorism. And if you would call the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition, extreme persecution, I don't know what to tell you. This is bad on levels I don't think anybody really understands. And if you think it ends with crazy death rates, you're being optimistic. A military state has endless implications that directly correlate to its security situation. We have no other land, you say. Okay. Yes, we have no other land where the tax rates funding the defense budgets sap practically every other public investment, infrastructure being one of them. We have no other land with mandatory conscription, which robs our youth of at least 3 years of their prime. We have no other land where we'd be getting paid 30% of the salary we would in the first world for the same work. We have no other land where the suffocation of artistic industries happens in inconceivable scales and lowers the variety of career opportunities for locals to the point where every filmmaker, musician, and painter has to move abroad to pursue a meaningful career in their chosen field. We have no other land where being able to buy a home is a luxury afforded only to the highest echelon of earners. We have no other land where the amount of money you have to spend day by day on cost of living alone could choke a grown elephant. We have no other land where survival culture corrupts the minds of the people and constrains them to existential concerns, which feeds into every other problem that stems, at least in part, from our foreign relations. And of course, we have no other land where destructive terror attacks frequent us about as often as a new iPhone release. That's just to name a few. So, yes, you might have to hide your Jewry every now and then if you lived in exile, which is another Zionist term that presumes this place is our only home. But considering the situation here, is that really that bad? And I'm not saying you should leave. All I'm saying is we deserve to be given the full picture, and passé statements like we have no other land should no longer have a place in our culture. We've heard that enough. The person who said that has clearly never been to Switzerland. Be precise. What we have no other of exactly is a Jewish state. And that too doesn't have to stay that way. So give them all the data, honestly, and let them decide. You already trapped them physically. The least you can do is free them mentally so they can break loose of this geographic Stockholm syndrome that's chained them for decades. It's not right that the people in charge around here should continue to feed us these demagogic lies about Israel being a haven for the Jews in promotion of their Zionist agendas. So immoral. We are not lambs you can volunteer as cannon fodder and let die in masses using deception. And it's not like this is some impossible information to get either. It was all predictable. The jihad isn't new. They got everybody slouching over this slab of dirt like Gollum, intentionally chanting, "My precious." It's literally killing them, but they just can't snap out of that trance. The only sound argument I've heard that truly puts Israel ahead of other Western countries in terms of Jewish safety is the never again thing. Even though on an individual level, I think it's obscene to live your life in constant fear of genocide, making so many sacrifices for something that statistically hardly ever happens, to me means you should never drive a car. That's way more likely to kill you. But as a matter of policy, I do think it's critical to have at least one state that's fail-safe regarding that threat. Yes, it's true that many countries, the United States for example, could defend us far better than we'll ever be able to defend ourselves. And even though they often go all out in standing behind their citizens over the dumbest things like gender identity protections, and will fight to the death for a man's right to pretend to be a woman, which allows you to predict their reactions to something like anti-Semitic persecution, seeing as there are far less persecuted groups who are extremely protected with far less justification. We're smart enough to realize that it's not just about sheer force, and choose not to depend on anyone, even the most loyal of foreigners, to ensure never again, indeed, never happens again. How do we prevent it here? Well, the risk of genocide is obviously a mix of multiple factors, the key two being government allegiance and military prowess. See, there's a few ways a genocide can occur. One, the government turns on its defenseless citizens with its military. Two, a hostile government exterminates said demographic because its government didn't want to fight for it. And three, a hostile government exterminates said demographic even though its government wanted to fight for it because they lost. So if the state is loyal and stronger than its enemies, there's zero risk of genocide. However, foreign relations also help, because if you can be loyal, dominant, and beloved, then you won't have to practice your fidelity or your might, as nobody's going to attack you. And that is where Israel, I'm sorry to say, has fallen short. I mean, they hate us, we know, but that's not the question. There's an apt analogy to be made here. I hope it doesn't trigger too many people, but it's worth saying. Think about it this way. A woman walks down an alley in a miniskirt. She gets attacked. The guy rapes her. Does she bear responsibility for that? No, of course not. It's always the rapist's fault. But what would you tell your daughter if she wanted to walk through Rapist Valley in a miniskirt? There's nothing you can do about it? Nothing? Are you sure? If you raise your daughter that way, I'm sorry to say you are a terrible parent. The same thing applies here. They do hate us, but at least before you, they were far away. You enabled their hatred to turn to violence by putting us in their reach. You didn't hold the knife, but you did hurt us to the chopping block. Why do we have to make ourselves dependent on the success of primitive cultures for the prevention of external hostilities? To please the Christian lobby? Or maybe it's for the man with the beard. No, but Ozzy, you don't understand. Our foreign relations are magnificent. Every time we approach negotiations, we come with a peaceful attitude and it's them. Trust me, I've heard it all before. No, but we always come, we make reasonable offers and they always refuse and try to kill us. Well, then why are you there? Why did you build your state around them? What are you doing in the Middle East? If you can't negotiate with these people, why are you even talking to them? Oh, we're not talking, we're fighting. That's worse. Why would you want to fight them? I know Israel's foreign relations problem has nothing to do with our attitude. It has to do with, ready? Say it with me. Location. How could we have avoided this foreign relations score? How about for a start, you don't place your supposed haven in the largest cluster of anti-Semites on planet fucking Earth. And what is it they say? What are their excuses? Let's go through them, starting with the first one, the most basic. This land is sacred. And I won't be dismissive about it because I am a student of Jordan Peterson. If you listen to that guy for any period of time, over 5 years in my case, You know not to belittle the worth of abstract benefits like proclaimed divinity. Supposedly, the city of Jerusalem and other supposedly holy sites here serve as inspirational icons that carry positive psychological effects for the cause. Having access to a place of historical significance that's tangible invokes a bond to your roots and ancestral culture. Fine. Jerusalem is a symbol of unity. But how many symbols of unity are there in this world? And what exactly makes this one worth the lives of 30,000 people on the Jewish side alone? Sentimental value? Let's be honest here. The reason the Israelis are as united as they are is due to facing constant existential risk, not having Jerusalem. I've lived here 26 years, been there 4 times total. Nobody really cares. Would have been just as united under the same conditions if we were a city in Texas. Now, what's the next one? I was at the Jordan Peterson Ben Shapiro event in Jerusalem a few months ago. Jordan talked about his new book there, We Who Wrestle with God. Again, if you know Peterson, you know how much he likes fortitude, the symbol of Jesus, handling suffering with grace. What is it we say here all the time? We want to be a light for the Gentiles. So maybe it makes sense that we came here deliberately, knowing how dreadful it would be, to maximize our suffering in order to serve as a tale of perseverance. Sure enough, we got that job done. 300 has nothing on us. The story of our origin is just incredible. But true though it may be that one needs to embrace pain in order to grow, and this is coming from someone who personally chose a path wherein failure means death, for that exact reason, leading half of a whole ethnicity to this insanely hostile territory to increase productivity is downright sadistic. And insofar as the stories go, attempting to be heroic for the sake of fame amounts to grandstanding, not glory. True heroism would have been to prioritize our welfare, disregarding credit or respect. We didn't need to go that far, whipping our own backs, to get to where we are. There's a limit to this thing. So that's excuse number 2. You could say this location played a practical role in garnering Christian support for the foundation of Israel, as the main reason evangelists supported it is because they viewed it as the fulfillment of a biblical prophecy. Their support was a crucial component of the Balfour Declaration, but that wasn't the reason the world accepted Israel. It was the Jewish humanitarian appeal. After the Holocaust, that was the primary engine behind the ascent. And the main reason the Brits even called for a Jewish state was to appeal to the Jewish community in getting support for the war effort in World War I. So even they didn't actually believe it. And that's proven by the fact that we were given options. But okay, here we're starting to get a little more palatable. Now comes the most reasonable argument regarding why Ben-Gurion and the lot, who were all dead wrong, chose to establish Israel in Zion. Here it is. As the stories go, there was already a demand for repatriation amid the Jewish diaspora at the time. Supposedly, people sat around the dinner table during Jewish holidays saying, "Next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem." All right, this is important because you do need people to build a state. And if this is what they wanted, that's what we should have worked with. But I don't buy that either. Think about it for a second, okay? If you're a marketer, which of these 2 slogans do you think would attract more people? We're building a Jewish state where you'll be safe, or hey guys, we're repatriating to our ancestral homeland like all of you have wanted, but it's going to be at war for the next 150 years. I don't know about you guys, but I'd pick the former. Oh, well, so we'll just hide the war part, take advantage of the demand for repatriation. It's like, are there people there? Yes, hundreds of thousands. Do they want us to come? There's sand there, just come. God. There's so much to be said about the morality of that, especially seeing as repatriation, delayed by 1,500 years, is not that different to a conquest. No, because repatriation doesn't mean you evacuate the locals. Yes, but if the locals don't want coexistence, that means war. You didn't start it, but you could have avoided it. Any sane person would have seen the whole Nakba story coming from a mile away. I mean, half of the displaced Arabs were fresh immigrants whose ancestors didn't even have anything to do with the conquest. And yes, large portions of them were moved by the Arabs, but the amount of mistakes we made after that is just innumerable. Fine, you made the stupid choice to come here and fight a war over absolutely nothing, but should we have kept their houses afterwards? Could have let the peaceful ones return. It's just a never-ending stream of fatal mistakes. The truth is, it is unforgivable. There are no excuses for the act of dooming the people you claim to protect to a permanent survival culture. And above all, the last thing that could justify it is the Holy Land myth. And you know what they say? Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism? Bullshit! The only logical conclusion one can derive in light of this information is that Zionism is anti-Semitism. I'm not sure even the biggest Jew haters in the world would argue that Jewish life is worth less than sand and buildings. And if you have it in you to listen to all this and still call yourself a Zionist, not only are you not a Jewish humanitarian, you are in effect an anti-Semite. If you think words on paper, sacred or otherwise, are more important than Jewish lives, you are an anti-Semite. If myself as a 26-year-old kid could figure this supposedly elaborate conflict out in 3 weeks, knowing nothing about it, then the founders of the goddamn state, with all their resources, should have known better. They should not have prioritized the sands over the people, and that is what they did. Now we have to work in the ruins of their incompetence. We can start by being absolutely crystal clear about the actual threats and impacts the Jewish people face here in Israel compared to abroad, and link it to a comprehensive security score. Israel is not the safest place to be a Jew. Israel is specifically the place with the lowest likelihood of Jewish genocide and the lowest levels of internal hostility. But it comes at the expense of many, many things many, many people would consider worse. The truth is, as of the last 75 years, and in all likelihood for hundreds of years into the future, outside of third world countries and Muslim countries, by every objective parameter out there, Israel is the worst place to be a Jew. Now, that could change. It only takes one little genocide in some woke country that let in too many Muslims for this whole situation to flip. And there are many who'd say they'd prefer to live in second world conditions and witness mass murder every few years than be lightly persecuted all the time with a higher likelihood. that it might develop into systematic genocide. And I sympathize with that stance. But tell them the goddamn truth. The whole truth. No omission, no agendas. Because this is life and death. Despite the heated nature of this segment, this is not hyperbole. It's statistics. If anything, it's entirely possible that this is just the tip of the iceberg